Did we learn anything from the first series of the Dan Wilson era? Is Bryan Woo on his way to earning Pitcher of the Month honors? We'll answer that and more coming up here on Mailbag Monday. Colby, hit it.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ahoy, sailors. It is Monday, August 26, 2024. This is TonaI Gonzalez and Colby Patnode for the Locked On Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're going to be opening up the mailbag like we do here every Monday and answer some of your Mariners questions. But before we get into this week's batch, shout out to our title sponsor today, SupplyHouse. SupplyHouse.com is a reliable way to get parts fast. Shop for your next plumbing, HVAC, or electrical job and get fast shipping from coast to coast at SupplyHouse.com. And if you want to hear from me and Colby even more and help support the show, check out our Patreon. The link is in the description, and you can sign up for a free 7-day trial. Super Soul 80_75 is going to kick us off here on Mailbag Monday with a very simple question, a question that a lot of you guys asked us. Thoughts on the first series with Dan Wilson as the manager?
It's always tough to try and generalize strategy or whatever off of 3 games because obviously like yesterday, for example, they were running all over the place and you say, well, is Dan Wilson, is that just part of his game? Is he just going to run more? It's like, well, I mean, we saw Scott Service have a game like that a couple months ago where he ran all over the Rangers.
Andrew Kisner.
Yeah, Kisner. They had 5 or 6 steals in that game too. So is that just because Casale's behind the plate and they don't, respect his ability to control a run game?
They're obviously very familiar with him.
Right. And same goes for Robbie Ray. A bunch of 3 of those steals came against Ray while he was in the game. And so did they feel like they knew they had him read really well and they knew when he was going to the plate? Was he tipping when he was going to pick off so they just could take off right away? Is it because Casale can't throw guys out, or is it just because, Dan has kind of decided that he wants to be more aggressive and he wants to try and manufacture more runs? It's tough to say. It could be either. It could be both a little bit. But yeah, I did think he was a little over enthusiastic to bunt in this series. But, it was interesting. It definitely looked a little different than Scott Service games. I think you look at, for example, one of the things that stood out is Bryan Woo getting an opportunity to finish the 7th. Whereas, the guy gets on base. He's at 91 pitches. Scott probably goes and gets him and he goes to the fresh arm to try and get that guy out. Dan, lets him go and it ends up working out nicely because now you just get to go to Snyder and then Munoz. And, both of those guys a little sketchy yesterday, but they got the job done ultimately. So, it's pretty interesting. It's tough to say one way or another, whether or not this is a true change or if it's just opponent specific.
Right.
It's a little tough to say one way or another, but it certainly looked different. Again, there was, I think, 3 or 4 bunt attempts in this series. They stole, half a dozen bags. They were being aggressive on the bases. So I don't know. Again, is that specifically based on the opponent and they just saw something they wanted to try and take advantage of, or is it kind of just the new direction that Wilson wants to take his roster and kind of looking at his struggling offense, hey, let's not hope somebody hits a double when we draw a walk. Let's get that guy in scoring position and let's see if we can get a hit and just do it that way. So, it's real tough to say. He won 2 out of 3. And at the end of the day, the only thing we care about from the manager is the result. He wins games, as a fan base. So tough to say. But I did notice some differences in the style. It's just, again, would Scott have run the same thing against this particular opponent? He might have, because it's still a collaborative effort and most of that staff is still there. So it's a little tough to say, but overall, I mean, I think you got a little bunt happy there, but I'm never going to really like bunts. So anytime you do it once, I'm going to be like, yeah, you're bunting too much. So, that's my only real complaint there, but yeah, so far so good. And the early reports out of the clubhouse seem to be that they really like Dan and the wording was they're flocking to him in the clubhouse. They seem to really like Dan and respect him. And that's the most important part.
Right. And it was very important to get that first win on the first game, and especially in the fashion that they did. I got asked when I did, our post game show on the Patreon, how important was this? And I think, maybe from a playoff race standpoint, trying to turn the season around standpoint, who knows? The jury's still out on that. But I think just for those guys in particular, what they had gone through over the last, 9 days leading up to that game, and especially the last 24 hours leading up to that game, those guys really needed that, and they needed a win like that. So I thought that was huge. But, overall, not a lot that you're going to glean from 3 games, and it's very easy to get into hyperbole here when we're talking about a 3-game sample size, because that's the only sample size we have. But the one thing that I wanted to get your opinion on, that you didn't mention here, was the decision to walk Lamont Wade there in the top of the 10th in the first game. They get the first out on the sliding catch by Julio, keeps the runner at second. And instead of pitching to Wade, was it Snyder? Yeah, it was Snyder who was pitching. Instead of having Snyder pitch to Wade, they intentionally walked him with the free base there at first. Is that something that you think Scott would have also done in that situation? Or do you think he would have let Snyder pitch to Wade?
Yeah, it's tough to say. We've seen Scott walk guys like that. He did it against Aaron Judge a few years ago, where I think that was the 9th inning, but it was still very clear. Like, yeah, we'll put the winning run on base, so I don't have to pitch to this specific player. Wade, versus Snyder, not a great matchup. Lefties are still handling Snyder pretty well, and Wade's obviously having a great year. Yeah, I think, I don't know. I feel like Scott may have made the same decision. I can't say for sure. But yeah, I did, that was something I saw. I was like, that's an interesting, it's definitely something to take note of. Like it's something that, isn't a no-brainer per se. Like you could make the argument, well, we have one out. So even if he makes an out and advances the runner to third, whatever, right? We still have the 2 outs. So, it's tough to say whether or not Scott would have made that move. Gut feel is he probably does, but I don't know for sure. And like I said, it's one of those calls where, is that Dan making that call? Is that,
Right.
ACTA is leaning on him? Is that Woodworth or is it just something they determined pregame? If we get in this situation, what are we doing? How are we handling this? So again, it's really tough to assign credit or blame for individual moves just because it is still a collaborative effort. But yeah, I noticed that. I thought that was it was an interesting decision. And
yeah, that was the first thing that I noticed where I went, that's interesting. So we'll see, all these things that we've noticed over the first 3 games, we'll see if those actually develop into trends. Next question here from SBR. Who do you think the September call-ups will be?
JP, if you guys missed it, he kind of randomly appeared in the lineup in Tacoma on Saturday. So it appears that he'll be back. I don't know if he'll be back by this homestand. I would assume they would want to give him a couple of games at least down there. He hasn't played in 6 weeks. So maybe he joins on Wednesday and then they just hit the road. Maybe he takes a couple days and he joins the team on Friday on the road. But yeah, JP will be back. Looks like before the end of September, as things are going right now, barring a setback. So
end of August.
Yeah. End of August. So barring a setback, which is always a possibility. So yeah, if it's JP's back by, August 31 or whatever, then they might just send down Rivas for a day and call him up the next day. Like that's pretty easy to do. If you're looking for somebody who's not on the major league roster right now as a potential call, because they will have to send somebody down for JP, and Rivas is kind of hitting right now. So it's kind of tough to send him
in
down.
My opinion, it should be Canzone.
Yeah, I agree. Plus Canzone can get regular playing time instead of sporadic playing time. So yeah,
that's part of my reasoning for it.
Right. Send down Canzone, and then obviously Dylan Moore with Rivas still up, with JP up. Like you can just Dylan Moore kind of becomes that outfielder that he takes over and all that late in games. So yeah, that's what I would do. But Rivas would be the guy if they do send him down. It could be Canzone. They could do the same thing, send Canzone down and then call him up in September. So
sure.
Or they could just wait until rosters expand to add JP back to the roster and do it that way. But if you're looking for somebody who's not on the roster right now, I would guess Ryan Bliss would be the guy that they would call up. He is, putting up really nice numbers this month down in AAA. He's cut his strikeout rate. He was about 35%. Right? It was started to drop. in the middle of July, and now it's down to 19.8% this month. He's still hitting 309, 407, 456, 121 WRC plus. We know what he does, what he can do on the bases. We know that he has power. We know that he's a nice guy to bring off the bench a little bit. And we know that they don't really want to use Rojas that much against lefties. And if you do this, you could put Bliss at second. You can move Polanco to third, or you can just, put Dylan Moore at third. Like there is some value there. And then on the pitching side of things, because remember, you only get to call up two guys. It's one hitter, one pitcher. Yeah. On the pitching side of things, really not a lot down there. So my guess is they just call up Emerson Hancock. And they just kind of, use him as kind of a multi-inning middle guy. And then obviously, like if they fall out of it or whatever, they might just decide to shut down somebody like Kirby or Castillo or Woo. Woo is now tied. Well, he now has the same number of innings pitched this year as he did last year. So, my guess is just Hancock, just because he's the best guy. Like, unless of course you're telling me that Garcia or Santos are coming back in September, which doesn't sound like either are.
I'd also keep an eye on Luis Arias. Really good month of August for him. 120 WRC plus down in Tacoma. He's really cut the strikeouts out. He's slugging right now. He went 5 for 5 the other night. He's having a really, really good month. Also, maybe Terran Vavra, who they claimed off of waivers from the Orioles. Maybe because he's a guy just with major league experience, can play a couple spots in the infield. So
yeah, it's not going to be Locklear. It's not going to be Marlowe. At least not as the extra call up. You might see them at some point in September. Again, if they fall out of it a little bit more, you might see some veterans take a back seat, and you might see some young guys get called up. But yeah, for now, as long as they're still within spitting distance of the division, they're going to go with the guy who can help them the most right now. And that is probably going to be Bliss, and it's probably going to be Hancock, just because there's really no bullpen options down there in the farm that could help you. If honestly, like right now, if you told me like, hey, we need a guy from the farm to come up and pitch in some leverage situations for me, I might say, okay, well, I guess you're calling up Hunter Cranton, because like he's next up. And he's close to big league ready, just stuff wise. So there's just not a lot down there. Vargas has been a disappointment. We know about all the veterans they signed this winter. They've all been disappointments. Cody Bolton's been really hit or miss down there, and he was hit or miss here at the big league level. So there's not a lot of options down there. But keep an eye on the waiver wire the next few days. That is also a way that you can add some talent. So yeah, just be on the lookout for that.
All right, we're going to answer more of your questions here in just a moment. But first, a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is once again brought to you by SupplyHouse. Get supplies from the site that's made for the skilled trade, SupplyHouse.com. SupplyHouse.com is the reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Shop a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands and get your order delivered right to your door with fast shipping from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Get expert support and industry-leading service from the friendliest folks in the business, and talk to a real person every time. Pros in the skilled trades can get a competitive edge by joining SupplyHouse.com's free Trade Master program. Every Trade Master gets access to a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Join the thousands of trade pros already benefiting from their free membership at SupplyHouse.com/TM and order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere with just a few clicks at SupplyHouse.com. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. You can catch all the action between the Mariners and the Rays tonight on the Mariners hometown broadcast with SiriusXM via the SXM app. All you have to do to find that is search the word Mariners. All right, let's get back into your questions here on Mailbag Monday. Jason wants to know, what are the chances that Bryan Woo is pitcher of the month in the American League? And also, if we hit the playoffs and he is still dealing, he gets a start, right? All right, so let's answer the first question of yours here. About pitcher of the month for Bryan Woo. I think he's got to be at least in consideration here. It's probably him or Framber Valdez at this point. Bryan Woo right now leading the majors in innings pitched in the month of August. How about that for a guy that was unable to get deep into games to start the year and was, having to have his starts cut short due to fatigue. He's been incredible this month. 1.59 ERA, 8.21 Ks per 9, just an 0.79 walks per nine. He has been worth a full win by Fangraph standards. Colby, you have any thoughts on Woo this month?
Yeah, he's got a shot. He's tied with Framber and F4 for the month. One more start than him this month too. So, that's kind of is a point in Framber's camp. But it's tough to say. He hasn't struck out a ton of guys, and strikeouts are kind of one of those things that people really look at when they're trying to decide these things. And he's got some stiff competition this month. Framber has a shot. Tariq Skubal's had a very nice month. Bowden Francis.
Francis he nearly threw a no-hitter the other day.
Yeah, he had like 12 strikeouts in 8 innings. So those big performances like that also really carry typically, but he's got a shot. He's certainly top 4 or 5 in the American League this month. So he certainly has a shot. It's just, is he going to beat out bigger names like Framber and Cole and Skubal? I don't know. Does he have that outing like Francis where he just utterly dominates and it's like so memorable that it might make a big impact with the voters or whoever picks it? I don't know. But he certainly is deserving of consideration. And if he did win it, I wouldn't be shocked. He's certainly been one of, if not the best pitcher in the American League this month. It's just that a couple of other high profile names have also been really great. And typically that's where those things go.
I am just in awe, though, of what Bryan Woo is doing, not just this month, but the entire season, really. Again, we've talked about it in the past, like he's mostly just throwing fastballs and doing what he's doing right now, especially when you look at the hard hit rate against, the barrel rate against, how low both of those numbers are against him. Again, when he's throwing basically exclusively fastballs, it's nuts. It's unfathomable.
Lefties have still hit Woo better than righties. He's basically nearly unhittable against righties, and lefties are still giving him a harder time. But actually, he may have found a solution here because the changeup that we've talked about, which has really flashed recently, he's not getting whiffs on it. He's only getting it is a 14% whiff rate on the changeup against left-handed hitters, but lefties against that pitch are hitting they're hitting 128 with a 205 slug. So he does have a weapon to use against lefties. Now the changeup has been legit against that side of the plate. And then obviously he pairs it very well with his fastball. So 2-seamer changeup really working against lefties, and then against the righties, it's mostly 4-seamer slider or sweeper, whichever one you want to call it. The distinction, whatever, might matter here because the sweeper has been significantly more effective than the slider. But so we talked about what can Woo do to really improve and take a next step this year, get better against lefties, and he's done that. And it's mostly because of the changeup. He is in the 85th percentile in off-speed run value. So the changeup has been very good. He's 97th percentile in fastball run value. He's even 64th percentile in breaking ball off-speed value. So the secondaries have taken a leap this year.
Yeah, so on the topic of him potentially starting in the playoffs now, you have to get there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Qualifier. Let's just get that out of the way, right? But say you do get there. This has obviously been a topic that our friends TJ and Lyle have talked about quite a bit over at Marine Lair. They are, or at least I know Lyle is, in favor of starting Woo in one of those games on the wild card. I don't know about the wild card. I still, like, if I had to guess, that would be Gilbert, Castillo, Kirby. Some variation of those three are going to start in a wild card series. But once you get to the division series, I think it's probably a piggyback start, like between Woo and Miller. Like you throw both of those guys in the same game at a team. What do you think about that? Or would you just start Woo on his own? How are you feeling?
There's too many factors right now. And again, we're allowing for the low probability or possibility that the Mariners do make the playoffs in some form or fashion. How did the rotation wind up at the end of the year? Because if they do make the playoffs, it's probably because they won on the last day or two. Like they're not going to get to reset their rotation.
No.
They're going to play the day 2 days after the regular season ends because they're probably going to have just snuck in the last day or two. So they might have had to start Woo in game 162 to get in, and then he wouldn't be available for that series, or they might have had to start Castillo or whatever. But I think, even in that scenario, it's a 3-game set. you're going with your two best guys in those first two games if you can, and that would be Gilbert, that would be Kirby still. And Kirby's had a really bad month, especially by his standards. But even that Detroit start, probably the worst of his career. But yeah, Kirby's been bad this month, but he's still George Kirby. He's still a guy who's not only dominated in the playoffs before, but he's actually used to this workload. And again, by the way, Bryan Woo, as many innings pitched this year as he had last year at the big league level, there's still a month to go. So how is Woo looking at the end of the year? How is
Right.
the velocity up? How's his arm feel? Is he healthy? Because you still are looking for long-term success. And if you have a tired Bryan Woo versus Luis Castillo, who's been there and done that before, you probably would still give the ball to Luis Castillo. So it's not as easy as just like Woo's pitching the best right now. So fast forward, a month, and he should get the ball in game 1 or 2 of your playoff series. It's not that easy because there are factors like fatigue. There are factors like how is he pitching right now? Like how has he actually looked since this month? Like if he goes out there in the last 2 weeks of September and he's sitting 92, 93, and he's giving up 4 runs a game, we're not having this conversation. So I would say right now in a 3-game set, I'm still going Kirby, Gilbert, Castillo in some order. And then, if you do happen to get by that, if you do happen to make the playoffs and you do happen to win that first series, then it's really going to depend on matchup. And again, how is Woo feeling? So it's entirely possible that you can go with Woo in game 1 of the DS. And it's just a little like, how much gas does he have left? Can he go 6 or 7 that night? Or is it one of those situations where I have to go 3 and then and if you have to do that, then you might just go with Miller and then just use Woo out of the bullpen in the playoffs, which he should, play up pretty well, all things considering. So to me, I think you're still going with your 3 veterans, your 3 workhorses in that first series.
All right. We're going to answer a couple more of your questions here in just a moment. But first, a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. You've heard me talk a lot about FanDuel, which, of course, is America's #1 sportsbook. Well, I have something a little different for you today. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon, that's LOCKEDON, to download America's #1 sportsbook. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. Once again, you can catch all the action between the Mariners and the Rays tonight on the Mariners hometown broadcast with SiriusXM via the SXM app. All you have to do to find that is search the word Mariners. All right, let's get into your last couple of questions here on Mailbag Monday. Switch wants to know, 2021 Casey Sadler, 2022 Penn Murphy, 2023 Justin Topa, 2024 Colin Snyder. Which one is your favorite and why? So these relievers that have seemingly come out of nowhere and have had a lot of success for the Mariners. Which one is your favorite, Colby?
Colin Snyder, because I saw it coming.
Okay.
Talked about it all winter. Colin Snyder, clearly.
Right. I mean, to me, it's Snyder because he's the one doing it right now.
Sure.
And frankly, this bullpen, you could argue, needed a Colin Snyder more than any of the other bullpens needed their respective breakout.
Yeah. Yeah, it's probably Snyder, but I would, probably say Sadler is a close second, just because obviously Casey's a great dude.
What was it, an 0.67 ERA?
0.69, I believe.
Oh, nice.
But yeah, I mean, and like Casey's just, a great dude. And I'm sure Penn and Justin are also.
Penn Murphy, also friend of the show, just like Casey Sadler.
Yeah. So, it's no disrespect. But yeah.
But now he's a filthy Astro.
Yeah, so like a little disrespect.
Right.
By the way, when did Ben Gamble join the Astros?
Yeah, that happened amidst the whole Scott Service thing, so that's how we missed it. Okay. Yeah.
But no, it's I'd probably go Snyder, and then Sadler's right there, and then Murphy got hurt, which is unfortunate because he really was just a really great like middle 6th, 7th inning type, and he was very durable, which might be why he got hurt because he got used a lot. So. We'll see, but yeah, Sadler, Casey is probably way up there too, but Snyder obviously doing it right now, and maybe not the best ERA of the group, but certainly more strikeouts than any of them.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I would say Snyder is the guy right now, and then Sadler is a very close second. But yeah, it's every year you're going to get one of these guys. It's just, you can even go back. I mean, honestly, though, in 2021, you could say, well, what about Paul Sewald? Like, isn't he the out of nowhere guy who came up and was really good too? And so, yeah, it's a bummer that the bullpen's been a bit of an issue, and it feels like it's mostly because of injury. Because if you put Garcia, Santos, and Brash in this bullpen right now, like, holy cow, that's a lot of stuff. Like, so sucks, but that's the reality of the situation. Then again, if you had Brash and Santos, you probably wouldn't have traded for Garcia. So maybe you don't put him in here. But yeah, Snyder's been just a fantastic and probably your most consistent reliever this year, even a little bit more consistent than Munoz. Although, yeah, the home run he gave up last night or yesterday was impressive, let's say. Yeah. But so is his ability to pitch out of a jam. So he's come up pretty big, really, since July 1. So he's probably my pick.
Yeah, I mean, that 10th inning against the Giants on Friday night was very impressive. And he brought the juice. He was fired up.
Assist from Julio back in center field. Nice to see. Well, for a couple games at least.
All right, last question of the day comes from Dom Canzone Burner, who wants to know, who are the top 5 catchers in Mariners history? Very topical right now with Dan Wilson, of course, taking over as manager. For me, already it's Cal Raleigh with a bullet.
I think the top 2 are in the Mariners dugout tonight.
Yeah.
Obviously being Cal Raleigh and Mitch Garver. So,
right. Right.
That
was a good one. I like that.
Yeah, it's Cal by a mile as number 1.
I mean, Cal's almost caught Dan, who's the leader amongst all Mariners catchers in F4. He's almost caught Dan in F4 in about a third of the games played.
Yeah. It's Cal. Like, whether you want to be like, well, is he there yet, or he's going to get there,
and he has one of the most iconic moments in franchise history.
I mean,
he's literally an elite company in terms of like the home runs that he's hit in this first 4 seasons. Around
with like Piazza and Yogi Berra. It's like, okay, I mean, come on, like it's Cal by a mile.
Yeah,
it's not close. The real competition for me begins at number 2.
Yeah,
I do think it's Dan Wilson still. I would say Mike Zunino is probably 3 for me.
Yes, absolutely.
It was a short burn here, but Kenji Jojima probably 4. The 2 years that he had here were just really great. And then after that, it's like
Dave Valley.
That's what I was thinking. I was thinking Dave Valley is. I didn't see Dave Valley play. I wasn't like, conscious when Dave.
Now he was hurt a lot, but Tom Murphy. Does Tom Murphy get a consideration here?
He was never the everyday guy because he got hurt, so it's tough for me to put him up there. But he's certainly up there. But if you're gonna go with part-time guys, like John Jaso for like the half year he was here was really good offensive player.
Caught a perfect game.
Yeah, so it's not a deep history of great catchers, but yeah, to me I think it goes Raleigh, Wilson, Zunino, Jojima, Valley. But based on guys that I actually watched play, like I can't throw Valley in there. Even I got the tail end of Dan Wilson's career, so it's even a little tough to throw him in there. But if you take out Valley, because I didn't actually get to see him play, it's probably Tom Murphy at 5. And if you want to throw in like real short time guys, Austin Nola was really good for the
Tom Lampkin.
Yep. The great Ben Davis, of course. Miguel Olivo, who could forget.
Now we're just naming guys, right?
Henry
Rob Johnson.
Blanco.
Humberto Quintero.
Good old Hank Blank. Miguel Olivo, who Dave Niehaus loved to call the golden retriever because of all the pass balls he would allow. Dave wasn't a big fan of Olivo's defense. But yeah, it's Raleigh by a mile, and then I think it's either Wilson or Zunino. And then after that, I think it's either Jojima or Valley. I think you can flip those. You can flip 2 and 3 in whatever order you prefer. And you could flip 4 and 5 in whatever order you prefer. But Cal's number 1. It's not close. And it's cool. You get him for another 3 years. At least.
I mean, Cal is already a Mariners Hall of Famer. Like if Cal retired today, And I mean,
Well,
there's obviously the
he's only
rule.
He's only played 4 years.
Yeah.
He's only appeared in a game before.
There's obviously that. Right?
They
But,
traded
like,
this winter. No, he's not actually.
but like, he's already
rule is
accomplished
stupid.
enough in a Mariners uniform to validate that.
I mean, he literally has the biggest home run in Mariners history.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. You watching right now, down in the YouTube comments, name a random Mariners catcher. That's your challenge for the day. Just any random Mariners catcher. That's going to do it for our show. But before we get out of here, a reminder that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. For Colby Patnode, I'm Ty Gonzalez. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at @LO_Mariners. You can follow me at Ty Gonzalez, Colby at CPAT11, that's CPAT11. You can also find all that stuff in the description of this episode. Now head on over to Locked On Seahawks to get all the latest on the Hawks before the season kicks off with Corbin Smith and the gang, and tell them Ty and Colby sent you. Have yourself a beautiful baseball day, and we'll see you next time. Peace.